continue here tonight. And I was talking to Coach here before we went on live, and I said, forget football, basketball, and baseball. Let's talk some field hockey tonight. But before all my shows, I want to make sure I thank the Rome Sports Hall of Fame for helping me sponsor all the Legends shows here. This is the first episode. This is number 5, but the first one of the month of March. Next week, I'll have my Uncle Paul 80 on. I'll have Jimmy Kenny on. I'll have Coach Fleet. And I'll end the end of this month with Coach Jerry Fiorini. If you want to sponsor any of the Rock Pile shows, just shoot me a message on Facebook, YouTube, or any of my social media posts. You can follow the show live on any of them. If you are going to put some comments or questions into the broadcast tonight, if you have any questions for Coach or comments, put them in there. I'll try to bring over as many as I can. It's always nice to see some former players and coaches put some comments and posts on here tonight. So I appreciate that. So without further ado, let's see if I can get Coach Harjung on here with me tonight. She'll be on here in just a second. Let me get her off mute. And now I think we can say we are officially live. Coach, how are you tonight?
I'm great. How you doing, Rock?
I'm doing good. It's always nice to get the coaches on, but I think when you come on before we go live, you get those sidebar conversations, and I think you probably stole 10 minutes of my material tonight. So
sorry about that.
but that's okay. But Coach, as I just said, forget football, basketball, and baseball. We got to bring some field hockey on. And when you think field hockey here in Rome, your name is the only name that comes up. But before we do any into that, I want you to take us through your high school, because I didn't know you were a multi-sport athlete.
Yep. Not like it is today, but when I went to I was actually born in Rome, but my family moved when I was 2, and I went to New Hartford Central School, and we always played against Rome. So it's just kind of ironic the way things come around. But I played everything. We were 4-sport athletes. I played field hockey in the fall, basketball, volleyball, and softball. And field hockey is the sport I always loved, but softball was probably the one I was best at.
And Coach, I was telling you before, I had to do some research like I do on all these shows. And I think I know a lot of the coaches, but when you hear a lot of the past stories and the history behind a lot of this, the one most intriguing thing I heard was you got cut from a sport. Talk to us about that.
Well, for all those kids out there that think they're all that in sports, let me tell you, and I was one of them in high school. I was one of the best athletes in high school. I wasn't outstanding, but I was probably above average. I went to Cortland, and all of a sudden I was on the bottom. I was in the bottom of the barrel again and starting all over. And I didn't realize at the time, and I didn't do the work. And I got cut not only from varsity, but I got cut from JV. It was devastating. Absolutely devastating. I'd never been cut from a team in my life.
And Coach, you bring up a good point, and I'll probably jump around numerous times tonight, but you bring up the point of, the 3-sport athlete, nowadays is pretty much gone. Years ago, you saw a lot more 3-sport athletes. When you think of that now from what it was years ago, and we had those types of athletes, what's changed?
Well, the state came out and changed the rule about practicing off season. I think it was probably because they couldn't control it. They couldn't police it. And a lot of schools were starting to do that and kind of get away with it. And they would play year round with these kids. And that wasn't the premise behind it. Was you have your fall season. When you're done with your fall season, you stop and you move on and let the kids enjoy another sport. And that's what it used to be. And honestly, I really liked it like that, because I would not have had the opportunities that I've had if it was only one sport. And like we just said, if I was only going to play field hockey and then I got cut, my whole dream, everything is gone. And then what am I going to do? So I think cross training is absolutely imperative for all athletes. I don't care what sport you play. I don't care if it's in peewees and youth and coming up through high school, college. I think you need to cross train. You need to be involved in a lot of different athletic opportunities.
Coach, do you think, years ago it was always, you were so proud to wear, the name, RFA on your jersey, whether it was the front or the back. But, now I feel like with field hockey and some other of the sports, you have AAU and basketball. These kids can play basketball all year round. In the wintertime, there's indoor field hockey. There's all these different travel leagues you can play on. Do you think that takes away from the three-sport athlete now that you can focus primarily on one sport all year round?
Yeah, I do. I think it takes away a little bit because, when I was coaching, you'd have kids who were on your team during the season, but, let's say they were playing field hockey, but they're already playing for basketball with AAU and they get hurt in a basketball tournament. And now they can't play for you either.
Hmm.
So I think that did make a big difference. And I think that just goes right back to kids being allowed to, or trying to narrow down to one sport. They're really trying to be competitive in that sport. So they'll do anything and they'll play all year round, but they still want to be a part of other teams. And I just think that's got a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and I think it's so hard when you mentioned that, you were a great athlete in high school and, you said you didn't put the time in, but when you got to the college, whether it's Division 3, Division 2, Division 1, I always say this on this show and my Saturday morning show, and I'm not knocking any of the athletes that have come from this area, but, even to play a Division 3 sport, the commitment, you have to be really committed. You have to be really good because it takes a special athlete to play at any of those levels, right?
Yep. Yep, absolutely it does. Division 3, I think, is even more so because you're not guaranteed. You don't have the scholarship. So you really have to show what you have and you're on the spot every single day. I mean, Division 1 and 2, you are as well, but they at least got to see you play and pick you. But then you've got to maintain. If you're not winning or you're not performing, you could lose your scholarship.
And coach, we'll get into some of your teams and all that, but one of the things I remember you said a long time ago, and I was reading a lot of past articles on you, is like my junior year team that went to the state championship. A lot of the good teams I played on, not only in high school but in college, we lived it. So when the
Yep.
season was over, we were in the gym, we were working out, we were running. Do you still see a lot of that nowadays from a lot of these athletes putting in that type of a time?
No, I don't. I don't. And I think early on, a lot of my teams were like that. I mean, they lived, breathed, and ate field hockey. They couldn't get enough of it. And when the season ended, all they wanted to know was when's winter start.
Mhm.
When can we start playing indoor? When can we do this? And I think it happens to with some kids, but not all of them. It's not the majority, I don't think.
And coach, let's go back to again, I want to go back to your playing days. So you get cut from Cortland State. Where did the coaching come from? When did you say, you know what, I think I'm going to be a coach? How did that
Well,
happen?
well, when I got cut, about a week and a half later, the coach contacted me and three other athletes and said that it was the JV coach. And four of the girls that they had picked for the team decided they didn't want to play after all the tryouts were done. And I can't remember if the season had started. I think it had. And they probably weren't playing a whole lot. So they decided they didn't want to play. And she said, I need more bodies and there's no guarantee. And I couldn't get there fast enough. I just wanted to play. So I did play my JV year. Well, I was on the team my JV year. I didn't play a whole lot. And so then the following year, I decided, okay, you either do the work and make the team and leave no doubt, or you don't. And so I did the work. I trained in the off season and I went back to tryouts and I was there for like 3 days. And I honestly felt like I was going to make varsity that year. I thought I was doing really well. And I turned around and I went and I talked to the coach and, I wanted to know what she thought, if she thought I was going to make the team. And she said, yes, that you will make the team. And I just kind of went back to my dorm that night and thought about it. And I'm like, you know what? Is this really what I want to do? And I went back and talked to her again before she made the final selections. And she asked me about a manager position. And I was like, well, I don't know. What's a manager do kind of thing. So, but let me tell you, if you ever have an opportunity to be a manager of a college team, you have to do it because you're in charge of all the money. It was awesome. Every trip that we took, and there were a lot of long, long bus rides, you're in charge of all the meals, all the meal plans and organizing all that. And I ended up coaching goalkeepers for 3 years until I left Portland. So that's kind of where my coaching experience came from.
And how did you arrive at RFA, coach? What brought you to Rome?
Well, um, the short story is I had a terrible student teaching experience when I was at Cortland trying to finish up, and I decided I wanted nothing to do with teaching. So I worked a couple of other jobs before then. One was with the Herkimer County ARC, working with some
Okay.
community-based adults in a rec program. And I also worked at the House of Good Shepherd for a year, working with autistic kids. And I decided after 3 years, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to lose my degree here. I got to get my master's or I've got to make a decision. So I decided to give it a try. And I ended up going to Sequoia Elementary School. The lady that was there, that teacher was on a maternity leave. So they had an opening. She was supposed to be there for 2 years. She came back a year early, but I took that position at Sequoia Elementary and ended up actually teaching a couple of my cousins, which was kind of fun because we still talk about that to this day. And it was a wonderful experience. I didn't want to leave. They didn't want me to leave. And then the teacher came back a year early. So I had to leave. And the only job out there was a part-time position at Whitesboro at Harts Hill School. So I ended up there. And all along I was coaching at both of those districts. And I went to a job fair and interviewed with none other than Fran Lazeski.
Okay.
And he gave me the application and I didn't apply because I wasn't sure if I was qualified because I was nervous about taking a full-time position. And he called me 3 days later and said, it would be to your benefit to apply, fill out the paperwork. And, so I did. And I interviewed and I was offered the job on the spot. They needed a field hockey coach. That was a huge push behind it, I think. And there I am, 29 years later.
And Coach, obviously we were talking before we came on how field hockey has definitely changed. And I said 20 years, and you said it goes longer than that. The sticks were different. You said they rolled the ball out at times. But I want to ask you about the athletes first, because you've coached a lot of good athletes. You coached a lot of good teams, and we'll get into some of those teams. But as far as the athlete goes, from day one you got your head coaching job at RFA, how much has the athlete changed?
Well, I was very fortunate. I was very blessed. I've been blessed all along the way with outstanding athletes on pretty much every team that I've ever coached in Rome. Two of my first athletes were Amanda Travis and Melissa D'Antonio.
Yep.
And they both went on to play at D1 schools, and that was all new to me though. So I was just kind of getting my feet wet, and I learned a lot from them along the way as well. And when you just kind of look at the athlete from season to season, we were at Pinty Field at that time. I don't know if you remember the field over there. It was terrible grass field. We had all kinds of issues there. But when the turf field came on, all of a sudden we started attracting all these really good athletes. They say success breeds success. You start doing well, you start winning some games, and you start getting noticed a little bit, and it draws in more of the better athletes, I think. And it did for a long, long time, pretty much most of my career. But as far as the dedication of the athletes, I think it's hit and miss. You have those kids that will live, breathe, and eat that sport, and they'll do anything they can to get on the field. And you have others that are okay and they're comfortable with just being a part of that team. They just want to play once in a while. And it's different, and every team is very different.
Coach, you didn't lose too many games. You won 352 games in your career. I think I got that number right. 352 wins, 141 losses, and 61 ties. But from your earlier years coaching at Rome, what were some of the lessons you learned that, as you got older and, you spent more time, obviously coaching, what were some of the early lessons you learned?
Well, I was out-coached what I believe was one time in my career. And I promised that would never, ever happen again. And it was in a regional game. Actually, it was a state game, and it was against, was it Lancaster? No. now I can't remember what school. I think it was Lancaster from section 5 or 6. And you just, and the whole thing with, regionals, that's what it was. It was on our own field. It was regionals. And I had a girl wearing a barrette, and somebody during the game, we scored a goal, but a player on the other